Hello and welcome back to Doctor Who Season Review, and today we'll be reviewing Season 44, Season 44. First up we have Death in Blackpool. Now this story is pretty decent of a story really. It has Lucy Miller and the Doctor visiting Blackpool, and the alien of this story is the Zygons. Now they appeared in the Zygon who fell to Earth, and here they're back here again. Is it a worthy return? In my personal opinion, no, it isn't. It's not a worthy return for the shape-shifting aliens, but they do a nice enough job anyway, just to pass the time. Overall, Death in Blackpool is a decent story. Next we have Situation Vacant. Now this story, it's dreadful. It's a horrible story. It's pointless. Nothing happens. The Doctor is weird. The plot of the story is bonkers, and the whole story is just dreadful. The whole story is just dreadful for this adventure. Unfortunately, it just doesn't live up to what I thought it was going to live up to. Overall, Situation Vacant is horrible and is a terrible Doctor Who story that should never ever exist. That's just my personal opinion. It's horrible. Next we have Nevermore. Now this is a pretty decent story for Doctor Who. I really like the Doctor in this adventure. He's pretty decent in the story, and the story itself is pretty decent, to be honest. I think it's all about the Time Lords and that, I think. But overall, it's a pretty decent Doctor Who story with the Time Lords and the Doctor. It's pretty decent. It's pretty good. Next, we have the Book of Kells. Now, the story is alright. The plot is decent. The Doctor and Lucy are great in it as always. Now, the villain of this adventure is the meddling monk, who hasn't been seen since Season 2 with William Hartnell in the Time Meddler. Overall, the Book of Kells is a pretty decent story. It's a pretty decent Doctor Who story, and a story I would love to see again. Just fantastic. Next, we've got Deimos. Now, this is a story about the Ice Warriors and one of Mars's moons. It's a pretty decent story. It's the first part of a two-parter. Overall, this first part is decent. It's a decent story for a two-parter, the first half at least. It's pretty decent. I like it a lot. I like the Ice Warriors in this as well. Next, we have The Resurrection of Mars. It's the second half of a two-parter, and the Ice Warriors in this are decent. Like the first part, they're decent. The story itself is okay. The plot is decent enough. And it's all about trying to get Mars back to where it used to be, and back to its glorious empire that it used to be. The Ice Warriors in this are pretty decent, I guess. Pretty decent. Not bad two-parter. Next, we've got Relative Dimensions. It's pretty decent, I guess. I mean, the plot is alright. The story itself is bonkers. Naff. The story itself is naff. But the whole premise of the story is pretty alright, I guess. Overall, Relative Dimensions, it's pretty alright, I guess. Not the greatest, not the best, not the worst. Just average and alright. Next, we have Prisoner of the Sun. Now, this was a pretty decent Doctor Who story. I like the Doctor and Lucy Miller in this. I think they're a decent enough duo. The aliens are weird. These weird little silver things, like the spoons. Like in, Series 7? But we'll get to that, I promise. Overall, Prisoner of the Sun is a pretty decent story. It's one of the best. It's one of the best Doctor Who stories ever. Next, we have Lucy Miller. Now, this is a pretty decent story. It's a good story with the Daleks and the monk in that are pretty decent in it, and Susan's alright. But this is the first part to a two-parter as well, to a two-part finale. Overall, it's pretty decent, I guess. I like the story, I like the plot, and overall, it was pretty good, and I really enjoyed this first part. And finally, we have To the Death. What a fantastic finale to a great season overall, to be honest. There are some great stellar ones in there. The Doctor is pretty good in this. Lucy Miller's pretty good in this. Basically, all the characters are marvellous in this adventure, to be honest. Overall, To the Death is pretty decent. Pretty good finale to a two-parter and to the series itself, to be honest. And it sees the departure of Lucy Miller, who was a great companion to the 8th Doctor. And this will be the last and here's another thing. This will be the last time that the Doctor wears his Edwardian outfit in the series. The next season he'll be wearing a leather jacket like the Hurt Doctor and the Eccleston Doctor. Overall, the season itself is pretty decent. So join me next time for season 45. Don't forget to subscribe to the official Spider-Man Pro 2004 YouTube channel.